I'm recording this at 3 a.m. right now, so that really shows how important this video is. How's it going, guys? Thank you so much for the support on, how the NASCAR is in trouble video. This is basically part 2 to that, and this is going to focus on one thing really and one thing only. That's going to be fixing the cars. It's going to give you a little bit of insight of how we can do it to help the on-track racing product. And in this video, you're going to hear a lot from not just me, but from someone named Liam. I talked with him a lot on Twitter and know him through some iRacing contacts, and he knows a lot about just how these cars work and all that. So he's going to be talking a lot. He's going to do a lot of explaining as well. So whenever the video cuts to him, you probably want to listen more to him than you want to do to me, because he knows what he's talking about, and he's going to do a great job explaining all the terminology that we need to know to really understand the cars. Then how, as we get later on to the video, if you notice the thumbnail, how a certain car is really kind of what we're looking for. So first we have to kind of understand downforce and also how turbulent air works. So I'm just going to go ahead and let Liam explain all that.
Is you want a high pressure zone on top of the car. You want a low pressure zone underneath the car. It's the exact opposite of an airplane wing. Airplane wing, high pressure underneath, pushes it up. NASCAR pushes it down. So your goal is to alleviate as much air underneath the car as possible, because when you alleviate air underneath the car, you not only gain downforce, but you also decrease drag. So it's an engineer's dream. You go faster down the straight and in the corner.
So in 2002 through 2006, we had some awesome quality racing with a Gen 4 car. But in 2007, there was a kind of a concept called coil binding. And coil binding meant that ride height didn't really matter. So basically, the cars were sealed. And they're sealed to the ground on the straights and through the corners. And because the teams knew about coil binding now, there's no real way of getting back to how the cars kind of like rode up on, above the track back in like 2002 through 2006, because it's not technically the ride height. That was the misconception that I even thought. It's not the ride height. It's the coil, it's the springs, the shocks that teams have figured out that you could just seal the car off. And it's going to be like that even with if we had the Gen 4 car, and then as you see with the Gen 5 and Gen 6, it would eventually keep going that way.
By the time we got to like 2013, it really didn't matter that we had a ride height rule. The cars were sealed off anyway. And the main point I bring up with this is a lot of fans will say, well, we need to bring the ride height rule back. It's a really good thought process, but the problem with it is the teams will have the car sealed off anyway.
Also, the big thing we have to talk about is side force. Side force is the #1 thing that is destroying the sport.
So the main issue you experience when you're behind people are two things. So number one, the one that most people understand is Aero Deficiency, right? The car in front of you has displaced air that is no longer hitting your car. In effect, you're going 160, they're going 200. The second one that is a little harder to understand and also explains some of the reason why the Gen 6 car has gone further and further downhill since we've taken more and more downforce off is turbulent air, right? And when a car passes through the air and all the spoilers and everything, it kicks it up and creates this vortex. So especially since we have gone to a shorter spoiler that's basically not there, when you have a clean stream of air, it goes over the rear of the car and it hits the rear spoiler. Very small. So it's very critical that you get all that air on the back of the car. When you have that turbulent air and it's kicking up in the air and it's going all over the place, it might just completely miss the rear spoiler, right? So that adds even more. When before, if that massive spoiler, it might have hit it anyway. It's going slower and it's a problem, but it might have hit it before, but now completely gone, misses it entirely.
The best way to explain the difference between rear downforce and side force is I could show you in a video. So here's Kyle Busch at Auto Club. He enters the corner. These cars are kind of loaded. They get into the banking in 2005 because they're not sealed off. So they get into the corner. He just spins it out in the middle of entering the corner. He doesn't have any side force to lean on. It's mostly rear downforce, and he's using mechanical grip. That's what it was back in the day. Now, I'm going to show you a clip from 2009. This was with the COT. A lot of you probably know about this clip with Jamie McMurray basically drifting through 3 and 4. Or I think it was 1 and 2 actually. So Jamie Mack goes through 1 and 2, he gets loose. But the thing is, side force is helping him. And side force was first introduced in 2007 with the COT. This entire time Jamie McMurray is sliding through the corner, air is basically hitting the right rear. He's sideways and air just hits it and he pushes it back. Hits it and it pushes it back. Hits it and it pushes it back. It's the same kind of feeling if you've ever driven a race car, even in iRacing, just kind of having a yawed out feeling. The car is yawed, so it's basically just, it's already loose, but air is just continuously hitting the right rear. And this is what side force is. It straightens you back out, which allows you to run a little bit looser car, which allows you to go faster through the corners.
The spoiler and the splitter, they work, not necessarily the splitter, but the front end downforce worked on the Gen 4 car. If you noticed, the spoilers are big. There's no denying it. The spoilers are big. They work because you don't have a side force, right? And so as you take downforce, like the 2014 era was the best with the Gen 6 car, there's no question about it. As you take downforce off the splitter and the spoiler, as you keep taking that down, your grip level now shifts from those two locations to the side force. As we talked already, the side force is bad for racing.
Side force is the number one detriment to racing. It is awful to racing, to turbulent air, because basically what side force is doing is side force, if you think about the width of a car and you think about it when it goes through the corner, and back in 2002 through 2005, you didn't have the width of the car. The right side and the left side were basically the same. You didn't have the left side with this huge fender flare and the right side basically, flared out as well. A good picture is Matt Kenseth. I could just show you guys here. Matt Kenseth, the left side of his car really flared out, the right side kind of, straight. And we want to get the right and the left to be even. That way you can't really rely on side force. The air is not hitting the right rear of the car. But when it is yawed out, and when you do have side force hitting the rear of the car, basically the air from the left front of your car to the right rear of your car is wider. That's a wider gap. If your car is already kind of yawed like this, you're covering more of the track with your car, you're covering more of the air, and the air is getting completely kicked around. And add that with the smaller spoilers, because you need air to hit the spoiler of the car to generate downforce. If you're kicking the air around because of a yawed out car, that rear downforce, that air that's now flying all over the place trying to get to the car behind, that air might not even hit the car behind's rear spoiler, which means that car behind has absolutely no rear downforce because he's not getting any air to his rear spoiler. That's why the lowering of the spoilers has been a big problem, because side force has become such a big thing. So this is the video I said we're going to give solutions. We're going to see what we can fix. So towards the end of 2015, this is really, really big. There was a test car that NASCAR was trying to get their hands around. It was a test concept. It was called the X3. Some of you might have heard of it, but it has basically disappeared from the face of the earth since this article appeared in early 2016. I'll leave the link of the article down below if you guys want to read it. But we will also, me and Liam will go through and break it down for you. Whenever Liam just pops in the video, whenever he does, whenever I decide to just pop him in there, just make sure you listen. But this was the X3. Notice some of the changes of the car. This car was using the 2016 Aero package. It had the 2016 body. It had the 2016 Gen 6 body. So how could that body still produce better racing than what we have now? Well, there are a couple of really key points we have to look at this car. And I was just talking about side force. And again, thank you to Liam for explaining it so well to me. But basically, this car eliminated side force. That's what it did. The goal here with this car was to achieve a crossover point where the front of the car and the rear of the car was equal. And basically, there's some easy terminology in the article where it says, to recap on some terminology here, the crossover point is essentially the yaw angle where the front and the rear side force equalize, making the yaw moment 0. So if the yaw moment is 0, that means the car is basically straight in the corner. The driver's turning left. There's no rear end kind of drifting or yaw in the back. That's what we don't want, because then the side force is created with the air hitting the right rear. So what happened with this race car is they were actually able to get that to 0. They were able to completely eliminate the side force and get back to what we want, which is mechanical grip. And how did we do that? Well, it's a combination of things. We have to go to the front of the car, and this is one of the biggest changes to this test car, which was the X3. And it's something that Liam vouched for. It was basically his dream.
My dream, if you could put all of it together, race car, is very similar to the X3 car and what it was trying to accomplish. What you're trying to achieve is several things. So number one, and most obvious to just about anybody, is even out the right and left side of the cars and eliminate the skew built into the bodies. The left sides curl in, the right sides do not. Curl the right side in, it looks better, looks more like the street car. Boom, helping the cars significantly already. The X3 car did do that. Next thing, and as you notice, that's pretty severe with the X3 is the front end, right? This stems back to what I was talking about with coil binding. Even if we switched back to a fascia, and Rodney Childers has gone on to talk about this, it really wouldn't change front end downforce and how we have to have the car sealed off much at all, right? Because the splitter already doesn't really do much different than a fascia. So again, I would be in favor of running a fascia simply because of the grass thing. So how are you going to get back to 2004 era where the cars jumped up out of the corner and had air going underneath them in the middle of the corner, right? How are you going to get them back to that level where the air is going underneath? Well, you have to, as you can see here, basically build it so it's impossible to seal the car off. So in the center of the car, there's a bulge that allows air underneath the front end of the car so that, quite frankly, you can't seal it off. You can seal off the sides of the car, you know, those two parts of the splitter, but the front end of the car is impossible to seal off. There's always going to be air going underneath it.
This opening in the front of the car, it makes it literally impossible to seal the front of the car because the left front of the splitter and the right front of the splitter are already sealed. So you can't completely seal the front of the car, which means air gets underneath the car, which can help with the airflow for the car behind. Add this with eliminating the side force, keeping the sides of the cars the same, where the front and the rear are basically the same in terms of alignment with zero yaw. This means the air flows a lot better over the car. I know it might be a little bit hard to understand, but basically the air is just flowing nicer. It's cleaner when it gets to the car behind, and now that a car behind has an opening on the front of the car, more of the cars can get cleaner air because that gap on the bottom will always have clean air. This splitter is only contributing 10% of the downforce, so it's easier to talk about and easier to explain through lap times and lap numbers. So this was an RCR test. So RCR tested this car and they went out on the track with the normal splitter design that is completely sealed. And what happened is they basically ran a couple laps and then they came back in, they raised the height of the car. Ran a couple laps, came back in, they raised the height of the car again. And what would happen is every time they raised the height of the car would be very different in the change. It would be very significantly different in lap time and how the car handles. Now we implement this new splitter where it's raised just a little bit in the middle, letting air get underneath it, and they do the same thing. They raise the car just a little bit. They raise the car a little bit again. Through each run, they continue to raise the car. The big difference was that the car never actually dropped lap times and it handled the same way. So what does this mean? If you raise the car and the handling doesn't change, that means it's less sensitive to the air around it. So we could put a car with that test car and it would be better running behind another car than it is now. It would handle a lot better because it's not as sensitive to the air. You can raise the car, and usually when you raise a car, you slow down because you're letting, if you think about downforce, like we said earlier in the video, you want as little air as possible getting underneath it. But with these tests, you were actually raising the car up, and the car was keeping the same lap times, which means it's less aerosensitive, which means we're good. There are a lot of other things that this car goes into detail to, and I'll let Liam explain some of those as well, and I'll try to explain some of them myself. But basically, there are differences in cooling with the engines where we could eventually cool the engines to make them run a lot cooler, be more efficient, be safer, so teams could actually use their engines for maybe a little bit longer, don't have to be so heat aggressive on them. Also, cooling down tires, cooling down brakes. Liam will explain that.
This would be a cost-saving thing. It would also be an aerodynamic thing. Basically, it's a piece of sheet metal, simple as that goes in the back of the radiator, little fan, ducts the air away from the radiator so that running more tape does not help your lap time or downforce. So that would allow the teams to run the engine cooler, which would then allow them to keep the engine around longer. It would keep the inside of the cars cooler. It won't get so hot. Also, a big one they're talking about is with qualifying, right? 100% tape, massive, right about to blow up, pump the ice into it, which thermal shock. You know, if you ever lived up north, the roads always crack open because of thermal shock and expanding and contracting, you know, and it's extremely bad in a motor. And I find this interesting they had this in here so we can talk about the aero package they ran in Xfinity at Indy, because that's part of what I would like on these cars. They talked about mandating these brake ducts wide open, and they were going to pump them directly on the tires. And the reason they were going to do that was to control temperature gain, so these, and also brake heat, because the cars are having to run such low tire pressures, not ideal tire pressures for a good lap, because the heat never goes anywhere and it just infinitely builds so hot the tire expands a lot and it changes the ride height. So a more inflated tire is taller, so it's going to raise the splitter up. And again, this even ties back to little splitter changes not making a big difference. If you can make that, this part also helps go away. We know right now you bottom out a ton on a restart. The splitter gets ground off, it affects the aero platform. You can't dry the thing because it's bottoming out constantly. So if you can control the temperature gain in the tires more, then they can start at an aero platform that isn't constantly hitting the ground. Also, with the brake duct stuff, it increases drag a lot, which again ties back to what I was talking about with the 2017 Indianapolis Xfinity package they ran there. And the thing I'm talking about is the massive gaps in the front end, the drag chutes. Simply put, if you can put drag on the car, we can add more horsepower. And more horsepower will allow the driver to do more, to pass better, less momentum based. If you also add drag, being behind a car can be an advantage more and more, right? The draft down the straightaway. There's more drag on the car, less air. You can get that pull up on a straightaway more. With that being said, you're like, okay, well, why don't we slap a big old spoiler on the rear end, put a whole bunch of drag on the car, and then we can pull up on straightaways a lot better. Well, obviously, that will negatively affect the cars in the middle of the corner. We've discussed that. There's just displacing more air. But if you put the drag on the front of the car, then that issue isn't there. There isn't air being displaced around the car. So the air is still getting there. But if those drag chutes are a negative in downforce, right? So it's creating lift, those two drag chutes. Getting behind somebody and having less air going in them could technically, I don't know if you could execute this right, give you an advantage. By having less air going into those drag chutes, the car would have an advantage being behind somebody.
The question is, where did this car go? Where did this X3 car go? Hasn't been seen. We haven't heard about anything. We don't know if NASCAR is working on a Gen 7 or anything like that. There's a key sentence that might be the real explainer as to why this car hasn't been heard of lately. It should eliminate aerodynamic side force from the equation and push aero sensitivity as low as possible given the constraints of the current car architecture. Now remember, this test was with that 2016 Aero design. They just changed the splitter, they changed the way the car tried to go through the air, they changed the yaw, tried to eliminate the side force, but that was with a 2016 body design. What me and Liam were thinking was the reason why we haven't heard or seen of this car is because NASCAR, in previous years, like the Gen 5 and the Gen 6, the car was rushed. When Earnhardt passed away, the COT was rushed to get into production so there could be safer cars, and then the COT was an absolute disaster, and the Gen 6 was also rushed after that. So would we want to rush another car with another different design? No. So what we're thinking is that NASCAR decided to take a step back, and they were like, okay, hold on. We've rushed the last two cars. Let's make sure we get it right. Let's make sure we can give the engineers a body that is designed to the point where they can really try to eliminate as much aero sensitivity as they can. This design eliminated as much as they could with the current architecture, which is the Gen 6. But if you give them another architecture, give them a Gen 7, which has a better innovations and better ideas for trying to eliminate the aero sensitivity just with the way the body is. For example, Liam went through a couple of ways where we could narrow the car, because we're never going to go back to Gen 4. I want people to understand that, because the safety regulations are in where, like, let's say if the padding on the right side and all the stuff that's going in the cockpit, it's hard to get the kind of the fat or the big out of this car. You can't really do it. But what we can do is narrow that height, or we can narrow the car just a little bit by narrowing the cockpit just a little bit. There are ways to do it. So if we could do that, we can make the car less aero sensitive just with the body design. And then engineers could go do what they did with this car in the X3 and try to create a much better car that races.
They can only do but so much with the Gen 6 architecture, right? The Gen 6, at the end of the day, especially the Gen 6, Gen 5 a little bit, but Gen 6 especially, was designed to go fast. You can only do so much with a car that is designed to go fast with a ton of side force. So if you redesign the car around not having side force and around, because downforce as a whole isn't a bad thing, right? We got to get that stereotype out of the way. Downforce is not a bad thing. Downforce can create great racing, and it can be fun to drive. For a good race to happen, and it's the example of Martinsville, it has to be hard to pass, right? If it's super easy to pass, aka Bristol when they repaved it and redid it, you don't race anybody. You pull up on them, you're faster, you find the lane that you can get around them, 2 laps, bam, you're in the lead, you're running away. And you just run your lap that's faster than the rest of the field. It has to be hard to pass, but it has to be hard to pass for the simple reason that it's hard to clear somebody. Right at Martinsville, if you noticed, you can't get the run off the corner because, you know, you're on the inside and the guy on the outside has a disadvantage of having to travel further. So it's just hard to clear somebody. So you can run them down, be right on their bumper, be on their inside for lap after lap after lap after lap. And it's not because of aero, it's because of the track design.
There's so much to go into that I'm not going to get into it all. But basically, I want you guys to really research it. Go click the article, research as much as you can about the X3, because this is a car that would have done a lot of help. And it goes to show that NASCAR was on the right path when they were looking at trying to come up with a plan. My frustration with NASCAR right now is, why have we not heard of this? Where has it gone? Only a few people knew about this. Some Reddit people and some people I know knew about this car. A lot of people, a lot of you, the casual fans, a lot of you guys, I bet, have never heard of the X3. Some of you have, but I bet a lot of you haven't. I heard about it back in, I think it was 2016. I completely forgot about the X3. It completely left my mind. I heard about it once. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Let's hope it comes out soon. And then it never came back to my mind. I completely forgot about it until Liam told me about it earlier today. So how do we fix NASCAR? The answer does lie somewhere in here. It does lie within all the intricacies of cooling the car, with trying to eliminate side force, with all of this. And it's a very complicated kind of story, but it does mean a lot. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. There's a lot of things to talk about, and I can't explain everything. Like, I really can't. It's really hard. I'm not gonna lie. I was thinking this video was gonna be like super duper long, and it probably still is super duper long, but it would have been even longer if I included everything Liam said, because we talked for nearly 2 hours, so it was gonna be a lot. So I hope you guys do your own research and, you know, share this video as much as you can as well, because there is an answer. There is an answer to fixing these cars. It's there. We can do it. It's possible. But do we know that it's happening? We don't. We don't have any confirmation. This goes back to one thing I said in my previous video about Brian France being a leader. And this is the time. Say you're working on something. Say that something is in development. Say that you guys are trying to fix the problem of side force. Say that you're trying. Don't hide. Don't hide. Just say. It will make me feel more. The reason why I am upset is I feel stressed because I don't have a solution. There's no solution that I see right now in the public eye that we're going to make these cars better. If Brian France came out and just said, we're working on it, we're working on a design that's similar to the X3, I would be way less stressed. I would be way more happier just watching NASCAR now, because I know something is in the future. But at the moment, we don't have anything to look into the future. This car disappeared. I have no idea what's happened to this car, neither does Liam. We're just hoping, our only opinion is hoping that they're implementing their designs and their innovations that they found with side force and the engine cooling and the tire cooling and the brake cooling and all that, and being able to, you know, not have to run any tape that affects the car. If we can do all of that and into a better gen design, it will end up be a really good race car that we can then, that's the platform we use for Gen 7 and we continue to improve in the future. But we've been told nothing. That's the problem. We've been told absolutely nothing. So if this car is real, if they're working on it, let us know, because then the fan base can kind of just survive the next couple of years through this absolutely terrible Gen 6 car. And, you know, maybe NASCAR's biting the bullet and they need to take their time to create a better car, but just tell us, because there has to be some sort of communication. Right now there isn't. And Brian France, that's up to you. But guys, that's this video. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like it, comment down below, what do you think? I know I didn't touch on everything, but like I said, it's really hard to. So I'll see you guys later. Hope you're having a fantastic day, and peace out.
Even if I tried, even if I wanted to, and I can't change. Even if I tried, my love, she keeps me warm.